Are you tired of the banksters making the big bonuses? Is your money in some savings account getting 0.5% interest? Well, take charge of your finance. Next Thursday, Alessio Rastani, the Robin Hood of Wall Street, will be giving a free webinar at 7 p.m. British Standard Time, and he will teach you how to buy low and sell high and preserve your wealth and learn a little bit about these markets so you can take control of your life and your finance. I'll be there. If you want to sign up, click on the link below or go to leadingtrader.com/real. Do it. You did a really an excellent interview with Vice magazine recently, and I really enjoyed reading it. And you were talking about politicians and how they deal with drugs, which is kind of what we're talking about here, and that's kind of what you do, is trying to get the politicians to approve your studies. And obviously, you were dealing with politics in the past. But you said that you watched someone like David Cameron when he was a younger politician saying that I want to change the drugs landscape, and as soon as he was the prime minister, it all switched. And I was just wondering if you could explain why that happens, and will that always happen?
Well, it will for him, because that's he's switched on everything.
You weren't impressed. You weren't impressed.
Well, hasn't he? We've seen it, everything he's ever done, he's changed his mind on. So, I suppose that's the retracting his views on ecstasy the day he was made leader of the Tory Party was just a sort of prelude to what's been happening ever since. I don't think he or the current Tories do have any proper vision of anything. But putting that to one side, are all politicians similarly subject just to the whim of the electorate? The answer is no. The answer is that the Lib Dems have been consistently good. They supported me when I was sacked. They opposed my sacking. They supported before that, they supported the reclassification or the controlled, keeping cannabis class C and reclassifying ecstasy. So the Lib Dems have had a very, very honest, rational approach, and I would trust them to bring in a sensible drug policy. I think I can say, I think it's almost certain that the reason that we haven't been pursuing the conservative dream of this solely abstinence-based treatment policy in Britain is because the Lib Dems have said no. So I think they've had quite a powerful influence on keeping a degree of rationality in terms of government and drug treatment. The broad disappointment has been Labour.
Yeah, you said Labour's worse than Conservatives as far
because
as...
their policy seems to be just to go with the Tories. They don't seem to have any belief system in themselves whatsoever in relation to drugs. Very sad.
So they do kind of the anti-Tory message as opposed to having their own...
Yeah, you try to find out what the Labour Party's view on drugs is, and they'll just give you some platitudes. So, we believe in doing whatever we believe in. What was the question?
So that's the party we would expect a progressive kind of attitude from.
It's really, it's so disappointing. So disappointing.
On an individual basis, my personal view is that as you, the higher up the greasy pole you get, the more you have to try and get everybody to like you, and therefore the more often you will change your views to suit the whim of the electorate. And I think it's almost inevitable if you're under the constant scrutiny of re-election.
Do you think that the public are so lacking in memory?
Yeah,
they don't realise each other. Why would you vote for someone who has no principles? I actually think
because they're saying the right thing at the right time. Most people that I think get voted in generally push the button that most need to be pushed at the time.
Yeah.
So whether it's down with bankers or it's down with unions or whatever it was at the time that most met the public sentiment.
Yeah. Sort of reaction politics. Sad, isn't it?
Yeah, very much.
And that's why we actually aren't going very fast in the right direction, if at all in the right direction, because people don't really have any vision of the future or have any sort of principles to work by.
It's generally the only, and you can tell me this, but in the United States, only when the president doesn't think he has to get re-elected does he ever get anything that he actually wants to get done through the system, right? Because he's not under fear of election. He knows he doesn't have any, he's not going to be subject to a vote, so he thinks I can actually do stuff that I want to do now, rather than have to worry about the next election in 4 years' time.
But then, of course, the Congress is worrying how they're going to be in the next election too, and how they're going to be judged. So
But at least that one individual can actually pursue his principles rather than his, election worries.
Yeah, but fighting the drugs fight, I'm sure it's just not the one that they choose, that they want to do.
What is just wrong, you see, because so many people have been denied access to helpful medicines by the drug laws. And you're seeing it, America, you're seeing the states acting out. You're seeing the states saying, it is wrong to deny our patients medicinal cannabis.
Right.
And they are then voting to have medicinal cannabis. And you're lucky in America in the sense that there is at least some alternative. Here we've gone the opposite way. The worst thing the last Labour government did was they persuaded the law lords to take away what was called the defence of necessity. So until 2005, if you had multiple sclerosis and you had to use cannabis because it was the only thing that helped you, and you were arrested, you could say, yes, I was using it, but I had to because it was the only thing that helped me. That was embedded in English common law for 600 years. And the last Labour government took it away, only for cannabis. So you can still say, I've got to use the mushrooms for my headache and you can get off, or I've got to use the crack cocaine for my muscle pains. But for cannabis, only cannabis, you're not allowed to use that defence. Outrageous intrusion on individual liberty. And hated by magistrates, because every person that is brought to them by the police with any cannabis, any amount, tiny fraction, they must be given a criminal record because there is no defence. All defences have been denied.
Not to mention the racial profiling and the financial profiling that happens.
Yeah, because what is worse is that the police are being incentivised to take assets from drug dealers, and they have a very liberal approach to what's a dealer. So what typically happens is this: is that there's someone with multiple sclerosis in a wheelchair, and they've got a cannabis plant. So they prosecute the ill person, the patient, for possession, and
with intent to supply.
And then they get the partner for intent to supply. They get the partner for supply, not intent. Because if the partner goes out, if you go down the street to buy a couple of ounces of cannabis for your sick partner, and you give it to them, that is supply. So that's up to 14 years in prison. And they can freeze your assets under the Proceeds of Crime Act. And they can keep those assets until you've gone to court and proved you weren't dealing. And it really messes with people's lives because everything's frozen. Their bank statements are frozen, their credit cards are frozen, their mortgage is frozen. And you don't know. It might take 3 months before you're proved not to be a dealer. So there's a horrible amount of pressure and the police can put through this cannabis legislation.
So you're encouraged by what's happening in, I think it's Colorado and Washington State.
I'm thankful. Okay. I think this actually, in a way, this may be the most important change in drug policy since the UN Convention 1961.
You know, it's funny, cannabis is called a gateway drug, but maybe in a way it's your policy gateway drug.
Indeed, it might be.
Because if the public can support it, like in Washington or Colorado, where it's not just medicinal purposes, which California has been for years, where it's a wink-wink medicinal purpose, but basically you can get it for whatever you want. These states have actually come out and said, just buy it if you want it. Yeah. Do you think that's a way, if Britain ever accepts that, to start really actually having a discussion about drugs?
Absolutely. Because I think what will happen, we've already seen, it's an amazing statistic out of Colorado, so it's only just made it legal.
Right.
But it's had medicinal cannabis, I think, for about 5 years.
And very organized, very state-controlled, very professionally done. They track the plants and everything in Colorado.
Right. Yeah. So, if you look at, I've argued for a long time that if people want to get intoxicated, they should have a right to use something other than alcohol. A lot of people would prefer to be stoned than drunk. And a lot of partners would prefer their partners stoned than drunk because they don't as much as violence when people are stoned.
A&E workers would probably prefer.
The police, even the police. In fact, the police were completely in favour of decriminalising cannabis until the last Labour government decided to reward them for arresting people for using cannabis. And then the police just switched because they were getting paid to arrest cannabis users. And that's why one of the reasons we had the riots last year, because there was this clampdown on young black kids with cannabis. And their view is quite understandable. So why should I not be allowed to use cannabis? You guys use alcohol. I don't stop you getting drunk. Why should you stop me? And so the arbitrary...
There is no logical argument to that.
There isn't. But you still get arrested. So
yeah.
A million young people in this country have a conviction for cannabis possession. A million. A million. It costs £500 million a year to pursue the war on cannabis. £500 million a year. So that's
which should be used for treating the alcohol problems that we have in the NHS.
Precisely.
Yeah, it's not efficient allocation.
It's absurd the way we do it. The police have, just down the road from here in Brick Lane, they have weekends, they put up tents, and they strip search people who smell of cannabis because they can argue that they might be dealers. It's an offence to kind of human dignity the way we pursue the cannabis law here. But let me get back to the Colorado story because it's fascinating.
Okay.
So Colorado gives us evidence that people actually do make rational choices about using drugs. So in the 5 years that Colorado has had medicinal cannabis, obviously some of that has been used recreationally. But what we've seen is that the proportion of people dying on the roads with high levels of alcohol intoxication has gone down by 17%. So there you see it. Of making cannabis more available actually saves lives on the road through alcohol because people switch.
Which makes sense. Now, try to convince my grandma of that.
Total sense.
But just for clarification, you're safer to drive using cannabis than you are alcohol.
Yeah. And there's a wonderful report that was just been published by the Department of Transport, which shows that alcohol is about 4 times more dangerous than cannabis in relation to road traffic accidents.
Interesting.